Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled, The Heart of the Grove Protector of the Cacao. The heat of the Costa Rican afternoon hung in the air like a silk curtain, warm and gently pressing against the skin. Through a narrow trail framed by curling vines and tangled greenery, you finally reached it, a quaint house painted in a cheerful, sun-washed yellow. Its terracotta roof peeked out through the arms of towering palm trees, as if hiding from the world. Birdsong echoed all around you. Not a single chirp seemed to repeat. Each call was unique, jubilant, alert, lazy, or curious, as if the rainforest itself were trying to speak in 100 different voices. The air smelled of ripe fruit and earth, of crushed leaves and flowers bruised by wandering footsteps. You paused for a moment, soaking it all in. This was the kind of place you could only stumble upon if you stopped trying to find it. A narrow cobbled path snaked through thick, dew-darkened grass leading up to a wooden door framed by hanging vines. Banana trees flanked the garden, their white green leaves shimmering in the sunlight like polished emeralds. Hibiscus flowers burst like fireworks in corners of the yard, their petals open and unashamed, daring the bees to ignore them. Your shoes made soft clicks on the stone as you stepped forward. As you reached the front door, it creaked open before you had a chance to knock. A woman stepped out onto the small porch, wearing a wide straw hat that barely restrained her cascade of copper hair. Her name, she told you with a bright grin, was Myra Velan. "You're just in time," she said with a voice as light as the breeze that fluttered through the trees. "The cacao trees have just offered their ripest gifts." There was something quietly magical about her presence, like she belonged to this land, like the roots of the trees whispered to her, and she whispered back. You smiled, more out of instinct than intention. Myra beckoned you into the house with a wave of her hand, and you stepped across the threshold, slipping off your shoes without being asked. The wooden floor was cool under your feet. The interior of the house was cozy and sunlit, filled with the scent of roasted herbs and something deep, rich, and unmistakably chocolate. In the center of the room stood a square wooden table, and on it were a series of small clay bowls. They held cacao beans, cacao powder, dark chocolate squares, and a scattering of tropical fruit slices: mango, papaya, and maragnon. Myra gestured to them with pride. "Before we begin, you must meet the flavors." You reached for a single cacao bean and held it in your palm. It was smooth and dark, with the faintest ridges along its edge. Bringing it to your nose, you inhaled the scent, earthy, bitter, alive. You bit into it, and the sharp taste took you by surprise. It was bitter, yes, but not unpleasant. There was a hidden sweetness underneath, like something waiting to be understood rather than consumed. Myra watched you, eyes twinkling. "Cacao is not just a fruit," she said, walking over to the shelf lined with dried herbs and bundles of vanilla pods. "It's a memory, a ritual, a language. It's older than the stories we tell around it. You sat at the table as she joined you, pulling up a carved wooden chair that looked like it had stories of its own. Her fingers ran gently across the tabletop as she began to explain the journey you were about to undertake. My grandmother made chocolate here. And hers before her. The trees know our names. She reached into a basket and drew out a pod oval, yellow with green mottling, and about the size of a coconut. She held it with reverence, turning it slowly in her hands. This is where it begins, she said. Outside, the rainforest rustled and stretched. The shadows of leaves danced across the walls like the flickering of an ancient flame. You felt something shift in you, not quite excitement, not quite awe, but a mixture of both. This wasn't just a visit. It was the start of something slower, deeper, something the modern world had forgotten how to hold. The scent of chocolate mingled with citrus and warm wood. A fan turned gently above you, whispering secrets from a different time. A single gecko clicked from the ceiling, as if nodding in approval. Myra stood once more and moved toward the kitchen. We'll begin at dusk. That's when the forest listens best. You followed her gaze toward the window, where the light was turning soft and golden, washing the garden in hues of rose and amber. The rainforest was waiting. And so were you. The golden light outside had softened into a hushed amber, and the air felt heavier, full of scent and stories that hovered between leaves. Myra returned, holding a wide-brimmed basket woven from fibers the color of river clay. She wore a long, linen tunic now, belted with a strip of twisted vines and small wooden beads that clacked gently as she moved. Time to meet the garden, she said, and there was something in her tone, both ceremony and invitation. You stepped outside again, following her down a slope blanketed in impossibly lush grass. The house behind you glowed like a lantern, but ahead, the forest unraveled in wild colors: yellows, oranges, deep leafy greens. It wasn't chaos, though. Everything seemed precisely placed, like the whole garden had been composed rather than planted. Myra stopped by a low plant with broad green leaves and tugged gently at its base. She unearthed a bulbous root, knobby and rough, streaked with brilliant orange beneath a coat of soil. Turmeric, she said, holding it out. For warmth and protection. You took it in your hand and felt its cool texture, then rubbed your thumb across the flesh, leaving a stain like golden ink on your skin. The scent was spicy and earthy, grounding. Myra smiled approvingly. Every plant in this garden has a voice, she said. But it only speaks when you listen. She motioned for you to follow again. Soon, you reached a papaya tree, tall and slender. Its pale green fruits clustered high under a canopy of leaves that fluttered like feathers in the wind. The ground here felt different, softer, more alive. When you stepped, the earth gave gently beneath your feet, as if the forest was welcoming your weight. Myra stopped at a lemon tree next, running her fingers across its bark. Then a passion fruit vine, its heavy purple orbs sagging under the weight of ripeness. Then a cluster of aloe, thick and sharp like a natural fortress. You watched as she greeted each one with familiarity, not just as plants, but as old friends. Eventually, the winding path led to the real heart of it all, a grove of short, ancient-looking trees with twisting limbs. They bore oval fruits, yellow, green, and speckled, that looked like swollen lanterns dangling in the shadows. Myra turned to you, her expression softening. "These," she whispered, "are the cacao trees." The moment felt sacred. She approached one and gently pulled a yellow pod from the branch. "Each of these holds a secret," she said. "But they never give it away easily." She placed the pod in your hands. It was warm from the sun, and heavier than it looked. The skin was textured and slightly waxy, like carved leather. You held it as if it might whisper something if you were quiet long enough. Together, you harvested several more and returned slowly along the shaded path. The birds sang softer now, their melodies slower, as if the forest had acknowledged what you were carrying. Back inside the yellow house, the light had dimmed. Myra lit a few candles on the wooden counter, their glow flickering across the cacao pods stacked like treasures. The fan above you still turned in lazy circles, pushing the sweet, earthy air through the room. Myra set the pods down on the counter and reached for a small curved blade. "We're not just going to make chocolate," she said, voice low and certain. "We're going to remember why it matters." She sliced open the first pod. Inside, rows of ivory beans were nestled in pulp, soft, fragrant, almost floral in their aroma. "Go ahead," she said, offering one to you. You placed it in your mouth and let it melt slowly. The sweetness was delicate and unexpected, like lychee, like something from a memory that wasn't yours. You felt the bean's surface dissolve, leaving the harder center behind like a secret tucked inside a dream. "Don't bite it," Myra warned. "Not yet." She touched one to her tongue too, closing her eyes as if hearing a distant song. In that moment, with the light soft and the forest hum in the background, it didn't feel like a tour anymore. It felt like a rite of passage, like you were being initiated into something older than language, older than chocolate itself. Outside, night was approaching, wrapping the world in deep blues and violet shadows. Somewhere in the distance, a howler monkey called out, and 1,000 tiny insects answered. Myra looked at you and smiled, the candlelight catching in her eyes. "Tomorrow," she said, "we roast. But tonight, we dream." Dawn broke softly. The sunlight did not burst through the windows of Myra's home. It crept in slow and honeyed, sliding across the floor in golden ribbons. You awoke to the rustle of leaves and the distant, lazy coo of a bird you couldn't name. The scent of damp earth drifted in from the open window, mixed with the subtle undertones of something richer, cacao, waiting. Myra was already in the kitchen, barefoot and humming a tune that felt older than language. The cacao pods from yesterday were piled neatly on a woven tray, and beside them sat a burlap sack filled with dark, dried beans. She turned as you entered. "Ready to wake the spirits?" she asked, handing you a wooden spoon carved with swirling symbols. You raised an eyebrow. She only smiled. Roasting is more than cooking. It's summoning. You followed her outside, where the morning air was cool and laced with the sweetness of ripening fruit. A simple gas stove had been set up on the back porch, surrounded by small wooden benches and a low table where several bowls waited, some filled with herbs, others with roasted spices, and a single iron pan already heating up. The forest stretched out before you, sunbeams catching on dew-soaked leaves. It was quiet but not still. Insects danced in the air, and the leaves whispered secrets overhead. Myra poured the fermented cacao beans into the pan with a soft hiss. The dry surface snapped and crackled as the heat began to wake them. She handed you the spoon and nodded. Keep them moving. Gently. You stirred slowly, letting the beans roll and tumble with a delicate clatter. As they warmed, the scent deepened. It moved past earthy, towards something more ancient, bittersweet, smoky, dark, and golden all at once. The smell of transformation. Each bean, Myra said, holds the memory of the tree that bore it. The rain it drank. The hands that picked it. You are helping it become what it was always meant to be. A warm breeze rustled the canopy, as if in agreement. The shells began to crack. Small, hairline fractures appeared across their surfaces, and the scent intensified. Myra stepped forward, lifted the pan, and poured the beans onto a flat stone plate. They hissed softly as they cooled. You picked one up, still warm, and bit gently into it. The shell crunched between your teeth, and beneath it, the roasted bean was softer than expected, grainy, yet yielding. The flavor flooded your senses, bold and rich, unlike anything you'd tasted before. It was 1,000 times removed from the sweetness of store-bought chocolate. This was real. This was memory and magic in edible form. You chewed slowly, watching Myra select a fresh handful of beans and pour them into the pan again. She turned the flame slightly lower and glanced toward the forest edge. "The trees know we're doing this," she said with a faraway voice. "They don't speak like we do, but they respond." You weren't sure what she meant, until you noticed the sudden hush. The birds had paused. The air had gone still. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. And then, as if on cue, the wind returned stronger, this time lifting the scent of roasting beans high into the air and scattering it into the trees. "You see." Myra smiled. "They always listen." You nodded, unable to speak. The moment felt too large for words. When the second batch had finished, she handed you a large wooden bowl and motioned toward the long table in the garden. There, laid out across trays lined with banana leaves, were cacao beans at every stage, fermenting, drying, and waiting. But yours were different. Yours were awake. Together, you carried the roasted beans back inside, the morning sun casting playful patterns through the canopy above. Inside, the house felt cooler, the air tinged with wood smoke and warm. Myra gestured toward a grinding station near the back, 2 small hand grinders with curved metal handles and trays positioned beneath them. "We'll grind these next," she said. "And from that point on, there's no turning back." You placed your bowl beside the grinder and took a deep breath. Whatever came next, it would be a continuation of this quiet magic, a journey through flavor, memory, and transformation. You were ready. The grinder looked simple, 2 metal cylinders set above a polished wooden tray, with a hand crank bolted to the side. It didn't hum with electricity or glow with magic. It simply waited, unassuming, as though it had ground time itself into powder 1,000 times before and would do so again. You took your place in front of it, the bowl of warm roasted cacao beans beside you, their scent still curling upward in tendrils. The room had grown quieter, as if it, too, held its breath. Myra joined you, her hands stained slightly brown from years of working with cacao. She held one bean up between her fingers. "These have seen the sun," she said. "They've been fed by the rain, spoken to by the birds, kissed by the heat of fire. Now, it's your turn to guide them into their next form." She gestured to the grinder. "Start slow. Let them know you're here." You placed the first handful of roasted beans into the grinder's chute. The metal felt cool beneath your fingers, contrasting the warmth still lingering in the beans. Then, with one hand on the crank and the other steadying the bowl below, you turned. It took effort. Not too much, but enough to make you feel the resistance of the beans as they broke apart, surrendered their shape, and became something new. The grinder shuddered slightly, and then, with a low groan, it yielded. A fine mixture began to fall into the wooden tray, a collection of uneven fragments, some as fine as sand, others still stubborn in size. Myra crouched beside you, watching closely. "These are the nibs. Their edges still remember the fire. Their scent still carries the sun." You kept turning the handle, listening to the sound of the beans breaking, remembering Myra's words, how each bean carried a memory. A leaf it touched. A bird that perched above. A child who once ran laughing near its tree. A storm that rattled its branch. You weren't just making chocolate. You were shaping echoes. Outside, the forest pulsed gently in the background. Birds called, unseen animals rustled the underbrush, and the wind brushed leaves like a painter adding strokes of life to a living canvas. The world moved around you, and still, you ground. More beans went in. More nibs came out. Time passed, not quickly, not slowly, but in the way time moves when you forget to watch it. Myra stepped away and returned with the second grinder, smaller, more refined. She set it beside the first and poured the tray of nibs into its top. "This one will take the memories further," she said. "It will refine them. Make them soft. But that doesn't mean they'll lose their truth." You took the crank again. This time, the motion was different. The nibs had no crunch left to offer. They were pliable now, malleable. As you turned the handle, a dark, smooth paste began to emerge from the spout, thick and shiny, like melted ink. The scent rose immediately, stronger than before. Richer. This was the smell of chocolate, unmistakably, but not as you knew it. It wasn't sweet. It was raw. Earthy. Honest. You paused, watching the thick paste ooze into a new bowl. Myra handed you a wooden spatula and motioned to stir. You obeyed, folding the mixture slowly, watching the glistening waves form and break like tiny tides. She lit a small burner under the bowl and nodded toward it. The heat will help release the butter, she explained. It's hidden inside every bean. We just have to set it free. And so, with the flame beneath, the paste slowly changed. You could feel it with the spatula. It loosened, became silkier, more fluid. The scent changed, too deeper, now tinged with warmth and something faintly floral. A memory stirred in your mind of childhood winters, hands cupped around a steaming mug, laughter rising into cold air. You hadn't realized it until now, but this scent had always meant comfort. You looked to Myra. It's beautiful. She didn't answer right away. She seemed distant for a moment, then said, "It's not just flavor. It's soul. Some people think chocolate is a treat. But it's a bridge." You kept stirring. The chocolate thickened and shimmered, catching the light like the surface of a forest spring. Suddenly, the air shifted. A low rustling outside. A flicker of shadow near the garden. You paused, glancing toward the open window. For a second, you thought you saw someone there just beyond the papaya tree. A silhouette. Still. Watching. Then it was gone. Myra noticed your gaze. "Don't worry," she said softly. "The forest always watches. But not all eyes are unfriendly." She placed a calming hand on your shoulder. "And anyway, you're one of us now." You didn't know exactly what she meant. But somehow, it felt true. You continued to stir, the heat now comforting, the scent of cocoa filling the room, curling into your clothes, your hair, your bones. The sound of the forest faded into rhythm, as if the world around you had begun to stir along with the chocolate. Outside, the light was changing again. Soon, it would be time to pour. But for now, you were between steps, between worlds, no longer just a guest, not yet a chocolatier. You were a memory in motion. And the forest knew your name. The sun had crept toward its zenith by the time the chocolate was ready. Its surface, dark and glossy, shimmered faintly in the mixing bowl like a pool of black velvet. The heat beneath it had been reduced to the gentlest whisper, just enough to keep the chocolate supple, alive. Myra set a tray of molds before you on the long counter, each one crafted from hand-carved wood or old ceramic. No two were alike. Some were shaped like hearts, others like leaves or stars. One resembled a spiral, curling in on itself like a galaxy trapped in wood. "These molds have stories," Myra said. "We use them to shape the memories. But the flavor? That's where your spirit speaks." She stepped aside and opened a small wooden cabinet. Inside were rows of jars preserved fruits, dried herbs, edible flowers, powders and infusions you couldn't even name. Scents escaped the moment the door swung open: tangy citrus, deep vanilla, sharp ginger, lavender, chili, tamarind. "Choose," she said. "What your heart wants, your chocolate will hold." You hovered your hands over the jars, drawn first to a golden pulp that glistened like honey. "What's this?" "Maracuja," Myra answered. "Passion fruit. Bright and untamed. It smelled like sunlight, sharp, wild, and full of mischief." You selected a few more, a pinch of smoked chili powder, some candied orange peel, a single violet petal dried into paper. With a careful hand, you folded them into the chocolate one batch at a time. The scent deepened, bloomed, expanded into something almost euphoric. Then came the moment of pouring. You ladled the warm chocolate into the mold slowly, letting it cool and settle, coaxing it into every crevice. The heart-shaped mold received the passion fruit batch, its scent spiraling upward like a fragrant exhale. The spiral mold took the chili-infused chocolate. And for the tiny stars, you chose nothing at all, just pure, unadorned cacao. Myra watched, nodding in quiet approval. "You're listening. That's good." When the molds were full, she carried the tray to a stone cupboard built into the far wall. It was cool inside, naturally chilled by the forest stones and shaded architecture. A breath of air escaped as she opened it, and she slid the tray inside gently. "They'll set in half an hour," she said. "Enough time for tea." You followed her out to the porch again, where she'd already prepared a pot of steaming guanabana tea. Its scent was sweet and mellow, somewhere between pear and pineapple, with a creamy undertone that calmed the senses. You took your cup, sat on the woven bench, and looked out over the garden. The cacao trees stood still, golden pods shining like lanterns beneath their branches. Birds swooped low and vanished. A breeze played with the leaves, the same rhythm you had stirred with earlier. It felt connected. Myra sipped from her own cup, then said, "You're wondering about the forest, aren't you?" You hesitated, then nodded. She smiled. "It's older than this house. Older than the village. It remembers things that people forget. Sometimes, it shows you. If you let it." Your mind drifted back to the shadow from earlier. "You've seen something," she said, as if reading your thoughts. You didn't answer immediately. "Maybe. A figure. I'm not sure." Some people say this grove was once guarded by a spirit of the trees. A woman with skin the color of bark and eyes like cacao pods. She watched over the plants, over those who respected them, and over those who didn't. You swallowed. And if someone disrespected them, she reminded them, Myra said simply. Then, with a twinkle in her eye, she added, but if you listen well, and walk gently, she might just show you things even I haven't seen. A soft chime sounded from inside, just a single note, like wind touching glass. They're ready, Myra said, rising. You followed her back in. The tray of chocolate molds now sat on the counter, their surfaces hardened to a soft shine. You picked one up carefully, heart-shaped, cool to the touch. Myra nodded. Taste it? You did. The chocolate cracked lightly between your teeth. First came the bitterness, deep, dark, grounding. Then the surge of fruit, bright, tangy, explosive like the moment of a storm breaking over jungle canopy. It was unlike anything you'd ever tasted. Not just flavor. A feeling. A rush of color behind your eyes. You blinked. For just a moment, you saw something through the window, a flutter of movement in the shadows beneath the cacao trees. Not threatening. Watching. Approving. You turned back to Myra. She raised her cup in a silent toast. Welcome, she said. You've made your first memory. The afternoon light filtered through the forest in gold-dusted beams, casting dappled shadows that danced lazily across the wooden floor of Myra's house. Outside, the air had shifted heavier now, laced with the scent of earth and distant rain. The kind of stillness that suggested something was listening. You sat in silence for a while, the taste of chocolate still lingering on your tongue like a memory that refused to fade. Myra busied herself cleaning the bowls and utensils, though her movements were slow, thoughtful. It was as if the process wasn't finished, not yet. When she returned to the table, she brought with her a bundle wrapped in a faded indigo cloth. It looked old, older than the house, maybe older than Myra herself. She laid it between you and slowly unwrapped it, revealing a collection of items, a small wooden carving of a woman, a cracked gourd bowl filled with dried cacao leaves, a faded photograph of another woman standing beneath a tree, and a feather so pale it almost glowed. Myra tapped the carving gently. Do you want to know who she is? You nodded. She's the keeper. The spirit of the grove. My grandmother believed she was real. Not a ghost. Not a legend. Something else. A presence that lives between the trees. She turned the carving in her hands. Some say she was once a woman, a guardian of the cacao, entrusted by the first cultivators to protect the trees and their stories. Others say she was never human at all. You looked at the photo. The woman in it, tall, barefoot, wrapped in a long cloth that blended into the shadows, stared straight into the camera. Her eyes were dark, unreadable, and yet somehow familiar. Myra leaned in, lowering her voice. Last season, during the first rain, I saw someone standing under the central cacao tree. I thought it was just a neighbor passing through. But when I called out, she turned, and she hesitated. Her eyes weren't human. They were golden. Like sap. She looked at me, nodded once, and vanished. No sound. No movement. Just gone. Goosebumps prickled your arms. I've seen her too, you whispered. Myra's expression didn't change, but something in her posture softened. She believed you. The forest doesn't open for everyone, she said. But it's watching you. You stepped out onto the porch again, your heart full of questions. The garden was hushed, the cacao trees motionless, as though holding their breath. The path that led to the grove now seemed different, deeper, darker, as if more had grown there since morning. You didn't hesitate. You walked. The trees whispered as you passed, leaves trembling ever so slightly. A single bird called once, then fell silent. The canopy above thickened, blocking the sun until only thin shafts of light guided your way. Then you saw it, the oldest tree in the grove. Its trunk was wider than a man's reach, its bark layered in spirals like the rings of time. And beneath it, someone stood. She wasn't moving. Just watching. She wore a robe the color of deep moss, her hair braided with twigs and threads of silver. Her skin looked like bark polished by rain. Her eyes, when they met yours, held the calm of rivers and the weight of ages. You couldn't speak. She lifted a hand, not a wave, not a warning, but a gesture of acknowledgement. Of welcome. Then she stepped back, slowly fading into the shadows of the trunk, until there was only bark where she had stood. You took a shaky breath and looked down. At the base of the tree, a fresh cacao pod lay waiting. Bright yellow. Perfect. As if it had just fallen, or been placed there. You picked it up gently. Its warmth pulsed in your palm like a heartbeat. When you returned to the house, Myra was waiting. She saw what you carried, and her eyes widened, not in surprise, but in understanding. She gave it to you, Myra said softly. You nodded. She doesn't do that unless she chooses someone. You looked at the pod again, feeling its weight, its warmth, its silent promise. What does it mean? You asked. Myra smiled. It means your story doesn't end here. It's just beginning. The sky had begun to change. The once golden light of the afternoon was now softening into the deep hues of twilight, but something in the air felt different. It wasn't just the turning of the day. It was as if the forest itself was preparing for something, shifting, bracing itself. You felt it, too. Myra had led you back to the house, the cacao pod still warm in your hand. There was an unspoken tension between you now, a silent agreement that something beyond the ordinary had begun. The pod you carried wasn't just fruit anymore. It was a key. A marker. A message from the keeper. Myra busied herself with preparing the space, small ceramic bowls, dried herbs, the faint glow of candles placed around the house. She didn't speak much, her movements deliberate and precise, but you could feel her focus. Her awareness. Like the air around you was thick with expectation. Finally, she turned to you, a small wooden bowl in her hands. She placed it before you, the surface smooth and polished, yet rough with the wear of age. "The forest waits," she said quietly. "The ritual must be performed. The cacao must be offered. Not for us but for the trees, for the keeper." You nodded, understanding now that this was more than just the creation of chocolate. This was a sacred act, something that transcended time and place. A bond between humans and the forest. Between you and the spirit of the grove. Myra took the cacao pod from your hands, her fingers brushing lightly over its surface. With a knife, she sliced it open, revealing the gleaming white beans inside. As the pods were split open, the air seemed to hum, a vibration that sent a shiver through your spine. It was the forest calling, the pulse of nature in rhythm with your own heartbeat. "Place your hand in the bowl," Myra instructed. "Feel the earth that sustains us. The same earth that gives birth to these trees, these gifts. This is how the ritual begins." You hesitated for only a moment before doing as she asked. Your fingers touched the edge of the bowl, and a quiet warmth spread through your palm, as if the very act of touching the earth was an offering in itself. The cacao beans inside the bowl gleamed in the candle light, their natural oils beginning to seep out. As you sat in silence, waiting for the next step, a distant rumble echoed through the forest. A storm was coming. At first, it was a soft murmur, barely perceptible. Then, it grew louder, almost as if the earth itself was stirring in anticipation. Myra glanced toward the window, her eyes narrowing slightly. "The keeper is calling the rain," she said, her voice low but certain. "We must be ready." Before you could respond, the wind picked up, swirling through the trees outside. The first drops of rain hit the roof, soft at first, then growing heavier, faster. The air was cool now, the scent of wet earth filling the room. You could feel the energy shifting, becoming alive. Myra moved to the door, holding her arms wide as the rain began to pour more heavily. The trees outside swayed, their leaves catching the water like giant hands, cupping the storm in reverence. "It's time," she said, turning to face you. You followed her outside, your feet sinking slightly into the moist ground as the rain soaked you both. The forest was alive with sound, the patter of the rain on leaves, the steady rhythm of water streaming through the underbrush, and the soft hum of the world around you. Myra stood before you, her arms raised, her face lifted toward the sky. The rain was falling harder now, but she stood undisturbed, a quiet figure among the chaos of the storm. The rain carries the spirit of the cacao, Myra murmured. It nurtures the plants, gives strength to the beans, and transforms them into what we need. It is a gift from the forest, a blessing for those who are worthy. You stood beside her, the rain pelting your skin, the coolness of the storm mixing with the warmth of your body. The energy around you felt charged, electric, like something ancient was awakening in the soil beneath your feet. Myra lowered her arms, her expression soft but resolute. It's time to offer the cacao. She reached into the bowl and scooped up a handful of cacao beans. Slowly, she held them above her head, letting them rain down onto the earth below. Each bean that touched the ground seemed to shimmer for a moment, as though it was being absorbed into the earth's very heartbeat. You followed her lead, taking a handful of beans and offering them to the storm. The wind howled, the trees groaned under the pressure of the rain, and for a brief moment, everything felt suspended in time. The forest held its breath. Then, as the last of the cacao beans fell to the ground, the storm began to fade. The rain slowed, and the thunder rumbled away into the distance, leaving only the soft drip of water from the leaves. The forest, too, seemed to relax, its energy shifting once more into a peaceful rhythm. Myra turned to you, her expression serene. The ritual is complete. The keeper will watch over us now. You looked around, feeling the quiet settling in your bones. The storm had passed, but something within you had changed. You could feel it, the connection between the cacao, the trees, and the ancient spirit of the forest. The keeper had spoken. And you had listened. The storm had passed, but the forest was still alive. The ground was soft beneath your feet, the air thick with the scent of fresh rain. The leaves shimmered with droplets, and the cacao trees seemed to stand taller, their branches swaying gently, as if the storm had breathed new life into them. You and Myra stood there for a while, in the quiet aftermath, surrounded by the living pulse of the grove. The rain had cleansed the air, leaving behind an almost sacred stillness. It felt as though time itself had slowed, giving you a chance to absorb everything that had happened, everything that had changed. Myra's eyes scanned the forest, her face serene but focused. She looked back at you, her expression filled with both understanding and something deeper, something ancient. The keeper has given us a gift, she said quietly, as though she were speaking to the trees themselves. But this gift, it is not just for chocolate. You didn't fully understand what she meant, but you could feel it. Something inside you had shifted. Something had awakened, and it was tied to the very essence of this place. The cacao, the forest, the ritual, all of it is connected, Myra continued, her voice soft yet firm. It's not about just harvesting the fruit. It's about honoring the earth, the rain, and the spirit that sustains it all. And now, you're a part of that. Her words sank deep, like seeds planted in fertile soil. You glanced down at the cacao pod that you still held in your hand. It had changed since the ritual. The texture was smoother, the color richer, almost like it was infused with the energy of the storm itself. You could feel the warmth of it, but it was different now. It felt more alive. Myra reached out and took the pod from your hands, her touch gentle. "The keeper does not give gifts lightly," she said, holding the pod up to the light. "And when she chooses someone, it's not by accident. You've been entrusted with something sacred. A connection to the very heart of this forest." She motioned for you to follow her, and together, you walked deeper into the grove. The trees were dense now, their trunks thick and winding, their roots tangled in the earth like veins in a body. The air was thick with the scent of damp leaves and rich soil. The path narrowed, the canopy above growing thicker, until the sunlight barely reached the ground. But there, in the center of the grove, stood a single tree that towered above the rest. Its bark was dark, almost black, and its leaves shimmered with an iridescent glow. Its branches twisted upward, reaching toward the sky as if trying to touch the heavens themselves. "This is the heart of the grove," Myra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The oldest tree. The one that holds all the memories." You stepped forward, feeling an undeniable pull, like the tree was calling to you. The air around it felt different, charged, almost electric. There was a deep hum, a vibration that seemed to resonate with your very being. Myra placed a hand on the tree's trunk, her fingers brushing against the rough bark. "This tree has witnessed everything, the rise and fall of civilizations, the growth of this grove, and the generations of people who've come here to honor it. It holds the memories of the cacao, the rain, the earth. And now, it holds yours." You reached out tentatively, placing your hand on the tree's bark. The moment your skin made contact, something surged through you. A flood of images, sounds, and feelings overwhelmed your senses. You saw the forest as it had been centuries ago, untouched, wild, and untamed. You saw the cacao trees growing from the earth, their branches twisting toward the sky, their pods glowing with a golden light. You saw the people who had come before, the ones who had cared for the grove, who had walked this path in reverence. The vision shifted, and you saw yourself standing in the grove, the same as they had, offering your gift to the trees. You saw the ritual, the rain, the cacao, and the spirit that had guided you through it all. The images faded, leaving behind a deep sense of connection. You felt like you were no longer an outsider. You were part of the grove now, woven into its history, its magic. Myra's voice broke through the silence. "You've been given a gift," she said. "But it's not just a gift for you. It's a gift for the world. The trees, the earth, the rain, they've all entrusted you with this knowledge. This connection." You looked at her, your heart pounding with a new understanding. The cacao wasn't just a treat. It was a bridge, a connection between you, the forest, and the spirits that watched over it. Myra smiled gently. "You are one of us now. And together, we will continue the work of those who came before us." She turned and walked toward the heart of the grove, where the cacao trees stood tall, their branches heavy with fruit, You followed, feeling the weight of the forest's watchful eyes upon you. The grove was alive, and it was waiting for you to fulfill your role. The air felt different now, as if the entire grove was holding its breath, waiting. The trees seemed to lean closer, their twisted branches reaching for the sky, their leaves trembling in the quiet rhythm of the forest. The deep hum that had resonated within the heart of the grove still lingered in the air, wrapping around you like a tangible presence. You stood at the edge of the grove, the cacao trees surrounding you in their silent watch. The sacred tree, with its dark bark and shimmering leaves, stood in the center of the grove, its branches extending far above you like outstretched arms. Its presence was more than just a tree. It was the pulse of the entire forest, the source of life, memory, and connection. Myra stood beside you, her expression calm yet filled with an unspoken understanding. She placed a hand on your shoulder, her touch both grounding and reassuring. "The Keeper has chosen you," she said, her voice soft but filled with the weight of ancient knowledge. "But to truly honor the gift, to become one with the forest, you must offer something of yourself. Something that connects you to the land, to the spirit of the cacao, and to the Keeper." You nodded, though you didn't fully understand what she meant. The connection had already been made, at least, that's how it felt. But there was a deeper, more sacred bond waiting to be forged. Myra stepped forward, her gaze focused on the tree. She reached into a small pouch at her side and withdrew a single cacao bean. It was larger than the others, its surface smooth and polished, almost glowing with an inner light. "This," she said, holding the bean between her fingers, "is the offering. You must place it at the base of the sacred tree. But it's not just a physical offering. It is the offering of your soul. Your essence." You looked at her, confusion flickering in your eyes. Myra smiled softly. "It is a symbol. The cacao holds the memories of the earth, the rain, and the sun. It holds the history of the forest, of the people who have come before you. And now, it will hold your story. Your offering." Her words settled into your chest, a heavy weight of realization sinking in. This was not just about the ritual. It was about your place in the world. Your connection to the forest. Your part in a cycle that had existed long before you and would continue long after. With trembling hands, you took the cacao bean from Myra. Its warmth spread through your fingers as you held it, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath it, as though the tree itself was calling you. Myra nodded toward the sacred tree. "Place it at the roots, and as you do, offer your intention. Your bond with the grove." You stepped forward, your feet sinking into the soft earth as you approached the tree. Its massive trunk loomed before you, its roots stretching outward like fingers, digging deep into the soil. You knelt at the base, the cacao bean resting in your palm. You took a deep breath, closing your eyes, and for the first time since you had arrived in this place, you let yourself truly feel the forest. The hum of life. The pulse of energy. The ancient rhythms of the earth that had been here long before human hands had touched it. With a quiet prayer, you place the cacao bean into the soil, gently pressing it into the earth beneath the tree's roots. "I offer myself," you whispered. "My soul, my spirit, my connection to this land. I honor the keeper, and I honor the trees." For a moment, nothing happened. The forest was still, as if it were waiting. The air thickened, as though the trees themselves were listening, taking in your words. Then, slowly, you felt it. A wave of warmth spread from the ground beneath you, from the roots of the tree. It was a slow, gentle pulse, like a heartbeat, but deeper, richer, throbbing in time with the rhythm of the earth itself. You felt a connection surge through you, as if the very soil beneath your fingers was alive with energy, with life. The cacao bean shimmered in the earth, its surface glowing faintly as though it were being absorbed into the very fabric of the forest. Myra stood behind you, watching silently, her expression filled with a quiet reverence. "The bond is made," she said softly. "You have offered yourself to the forest, and in return, the forest has accepted you. You are part of it now, just as the trees are part of you." You stood, your heart racing, and took a deep breath. The grove felt different now. The air felt heavier with magic, with life, with a sense of belonging that you had never felt before. And then, from deep within the forest, you heard it. A soft whisper, like a breeze through the leaves. A voice, ancient and full of wisdom. It wasn't words you could understand, but it was a message nonetheless, a message that echoed through your very soul. You had become part of the grove. The cacao, the trees, the earth, they were all bound to you now. And you to them. You turned to Myra, who was watching you with a knowing smile. "You are one with the keeper," she said. "And with that bond, the forest will guide you. You'll hear its voice, and you'll know its needs." You nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. This was just the beginning. The forest seemed to breathe with you now. The pulse that had thrummed beneath your fingertips when you placed the cacao bean into the earth still echoed in your chest, steady and strong. It was as though the entire grove had become a part of you, its rhythm, its life, now entwined with your own. Myra's presence beside you felt like the calm after a storm, still, yet full of something deep, something unspoken. She didn't need to say anything. Her knowing gaze spoke volumes, as if she understood what you were feeling before you could even name it. The moment of connection had passed, and yet, it lingered. The forest was different, more alive, more vivid than before. The air tasted sweeter, the colors of the trees richer, the sounds of the birds more distinct. Every leaf, every branch, every stone seemed to hum with life. And you felt the energy thrumming beneath your skin, through your veins, in time with the beat of the earth. Myra motioned for you to follow her as she began walking deeper into the grove. "The forest is calling you now," she said, her voice calm yet urgent. "It has accepted your offering. And now it will show you the way." You followed her without question, your steps light, as though the ground beneath you was guiding you, supporting you. Each step felt like a promise of how to honor the land, to honor the spirit of the cacao, and to honor the keeper. The deeper you ventured into the grove, the more the forest seemed to close in around you. The trees were taller here, their trunks massive, their branches thick with leaves that swayed softly in the wind. The air grew cooler, the shadows longer, but it wasn't a darkness that threatened. It was a quiet, peaceful shadow, a place where things grew, where life blossomed in secret. Soon, you reached the clearing. In the center stood a large stone altar, weathered and worn by time. Its surface was covered in moss, and the edges were adorned with intricate carving symbols you didn't understand, but they were beautiful, filled with meaning. Myra turned to face you, her expression solemn. "This is the heart of the grove," she said softly. "Here is where the forest spirit resides. Here is where you will find the answers you seek." You stepped forward, drawn to the altar. The closer you got, the more the air around you seemed to hum, like the vibrations of a distant song. You could feel the forest's presence more strongly here. It was as though the very ground beneath your feet was alive, shifting, breathing with you. Myra placed her hand on the altar, her fingers tracing the carvings. "The forest speaks through the spirit of the cacao," she explained. "It is the bridge between us and the land. The keeper watches over this place, guides those who are worthy, and helps them understand their place in the world. But the connection is fragile. It must be nurtured." You placed your hand on the altar beside hers, feeling the stone cool against your skin. The moment your fingers made contact, something shifted. A pulse, a heartbeat ran through the stone, through the ground, through your body. It was the forest spirit, reaching out to you, welcoming you. The carvings on the altar seemed to come alive, the lines shifting and swirling as though they were moving, changing before your eyes. You could hear a soft whisper, a language you didn't understand, but it wasn't frightening. It was comforting, like a lullaby carried on the wind. And then, as the whispers grew louder, the forest began to speak more clearly. Not in words, but in feelings, in visions. You saw the cacao trees lush, green, full of fruit. You saw the rain falling, the soil rich and fertile, the sun shining in gentle warmth. But then, the vision shifted. The trees began to wither, their leaves turning brown, the fruit shriveling. The sky darkened, and the rain turned to dust. It was a vision of loss, of imbalance, of neglect. But then, another vision emerged. You saw yourself, standing tall among the trees, your hands outstretched toward the sky. The cacao trees bloomed once more, their leaves green, their fruit ripening in abundance. The rain returned, gentle and nourishing. The forest was alive again, brimming with energy, with life, with the pulse of nature. The vision faded, and you were left standing at the altar, your heart racing. Myra watched you closely, her gaze steady. "The forest is warning you," she said quietly. "The balance must be maintained. The keeper has chosen you, but with that choice comes responsibility. You are not just a part of this grove. You are its guardian now. You nodded, understanding the weight of her words. You had not only accepted the gift of the cacao, but you had also been entrusted with the spirit of the forest itself. Myra's eyes softened. The forest will guide you, she said. But it is up to you to keep it alive. To protect it. To listen to its needs. The realization settled in. This was no longer just a journey. This was a commitment, a lifetime of honoring the land, the trees, the cacao. A lifetime of nurturing the connection between you and the spirit of the grove. You felt the weight of it, but you didn't fear it. Instead, you felt a sense of purpose, a clarity that had not been there before. The forest had spoken. And now, you would listen. The wind shifted again, stronger this time, sending ripples through the canopy above. The air was thick, charged with the promise of more rain. The forest had been still for a moment, but now, you could feel it, an undercurrent of energy, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. Myra, still standing beside you at the altar, seemed to sense it too. She turned her gaze toward the sky, her expression focused and calm, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a quiet urgency. She knew the forest, the rhythm of the land, and right now, that rhythm was shifting. The balance is delicate, she said softly, as if speaking to the trees themselves. The forest responds to us, yes. But it also speaks to the world beyond. You looked up at the sky. The clouds had gathered, thick and low, hanging like a heavy curtain. The wind was carrying the scent of rain, wet earth, fresh leaves, and something sharper, something old, something primal. The rain returns, Myra whispered, her voice almost reverent. You could feel the change in the air. The rain was coming, not like before, not like the cleansing storm that had graced the grove the night before. This time, it felt different. There was a heaviness to it, a weight in the sky, as though the storm itself had a message to deliver. You stepped away from the altar, your feet sinking into the soft earth, and turned toward the path that led deeper into the grove. The trees around you seemed to watch, their leaves rustling with an almost imperceptible whisper, as if the forest were holding a collective breath. Myra followed, her pace measured, calm, but you could see the tension in her posture, the way her eyes flicked toward the horizon. She was waiting for something. Watching for something. And then it came. The first raindrop fell heavy, cold, splattering against the earth with a sharp crack. Then another. And another. Soon, the rain was falling in sheets, pounding the ground, and the sky lit up with streaks of lightning. The wind howled, bending the trees, and the earth trembled beneath your feet. But this wasn't just a storm. This was a calling. Myra didn't flinch. She stepped forward, holding her arms out, palms open to the sky. The rain drenched her instantly, but she stood unmoving, as if the storm were a part of her, as if she were part of it. Her face was turned toward the sky, her eyes closed, and for a moment, she seemed to disappear into the storm itself. You stood there, watching, feeling the energy of the forest surge around you. The rain wasn't just water. It was life. It was power. And it was speaking to you. As the storm reached its peak, Myra spoke, her voice rising above the roar of the rain and the wind. "The keeper is calling," she shouted. "The balance must be restored. The forest spirit is restless, and it calls for a new protector." Your heart raced as the words sank in. The forest had chosen you, yes, but now, it was asking for something more. Something deeper. The trees groaned under the pressure of the wind, their roots twisting in the soil, reaching for something just beyond their grasp. The cacao trees stood tall, their branches heavy with fruit, but their leaves trembled as if they, too, were waiting for the storm to pass. The air was thick with the scent of earth and rain, and you felt the weight of it in your chest. You stepped forward, your feet sinking into the wet soil, your body alive with the energy of the storm. You had been given the gift of the cacao, the connection to the forest, but now you realized that this was more than just an offering. This was a challenge. A responsibility. Myra reached out, her hand steady despite the storm, and placed it on your shoulder. "The forest needs you," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos around you. "But you must choose. You must accept your role as protector. Not just of the trees, but of the land, the rain, the spirit of the cacao." You nodded, understanding the weight of her words. This was no longer about simply living in harmony with the forest. This was about becoming its guardian, its voice in the world beyond, its connection to the land, to the spirit of life itself. The storm raged around you, but inside, you felt calm. You felt connected, as though the forest's heartbeat was now your own. The rain washed away the doubts, the uncertainties, and you knew, deep in your soul, that this was where you belonged. With a deep breath, you lifted your arms to the sky, feeling the rain pour over you, washing you clean, grounding you in the earth. The storm was no longer a threat. It was an invitation. "I accept," you said, your voice carrying on the wind, rising above the roar of the storm. "I will protect the grove. I will honor the cacao. I will be the keeper." The rain seemed to respond, the wind dying down as the storm began to pass. The sky slowly cleared, and the forest took a deep breath, as if it, too, had been waiting for this moment. Myra stood beside you, her gaze steady. "Then the forest has its protector," she said softly. "The keeper has spoken. And now, you will carry the spirit of the grove with you." You looked around, seeing the trees, the cacao, the earth, all standing with you. You felt the weight of the forest's presence in your bones, in your heart. You were no longer an outsider. You were part of this land, part of this living, breathing force. And with that, The rain finally stopped. The sky cleared, and the sun began to break through the clouds. The grove was quiet once more, but you knew it would never be the same. Not for you, and not for the forest. You were its protector now. And the spirit of the cacao, the keeper, would always guide you. The sky was clearing now, the last remnants of the storm slipping away like a fading dream. The rain had softened the air, leaving it cool and fresh. The earth around you was alive with energy, the leaves glistening in the last rays of sunlight. The cacao trees stood tall and proud, their pods heavy with promise. The forest had settled into a quiet hum, as though it, too, was absorbing the changes that had just taken place. Myra stood beside you, her gaze focused and knowing. She seemed to be waiting for something, as if she were allowing the weight of the moment to settle over you. There was a stillness now that hadn't been there before. It was as if the forest had accepted your pledge, as if it were acknowledging your new role. The path ahead will not be easy, she said, her voice steady, yet full of the wisdom only someone who had lived among the trees for so long could possess. The spirit of the cacao is ancient, and it has many guardians. But you are the one chosen now. You must protect not only the trees, but the balance that sustains them. You nodded, feeling the gravity of her words. The forest was more than just trees and cacao, it was an ecosystem, a living, breathing entity that thrived on balance. And you now stood at the heart of that balance, the protector of it all. Myra turned and began to walk deeper into the grove, motioning for you to follow. There are challenges ahead, and they will test you in ways you can't yet understand. But you are not alone. The forest will always be with you. And so will the keeper. You followed her, your feet steady on the wet ground. The path seemed familiar now, like you had walked it 100 times before. The trees seemed to open for you, their branches swaying gently as if acknowledging your presence. It was as though the forest had accepted you fully, as if you were no longer an outsider, but a part of its intricate web of life. The deeper you walked, the quieter the forest became. The sounds of the storm were now replaced by a soft, rhythmic rustling, the whisper of leaves in the wind. You could feel the energy of the grove intensifying, like the air was thick with purpose. Eventually, you reached the heart of the grove once more, the sacred tree. It stood there, towering and majestic, its bark shimmering faintly in the sunlight. It was the center of everything, the source of the grove's life force. The roots twisted deep into the earth, and the branches stretched toward the heavens, as if it were reaching for something beyond the sky. Myra stopped in front of the tree, turning to face you. Her eyes were filled with a quiet reverence. "This is the heart of the forest," she said, her voice soft but firm. "And this is where your journey truly begins." You stepped forward, drawn to the tree's immense presence. The ground beneath you hummed with life, and as you placed your hand on the trunk, you felt it, the connection, the pulse of the forest flowing through you. It was as though the tree was speaking to you, its ancient wisdom passing through you like a river of energy. Myra watched you closely. "The keeper will guide you," she said. but you must learn to listen, to understand the forest's needs. The cacao is a gift, but it comes with responsibility. You will need to cultivate the land, protect the trees, and ensure that the balance is maintained. You felt a surge of determination, a sense of purpose rising within you. This was your path now, and you would follow it with everything you had. You were not just protecting the trees, you were protecting the very soul of the forest. Myra smiled, her gaze softening. You are ready. The forest has accepted you, and you have accepted its call. She turned and began walking away from the tree, her footsteps light and sure. Come, she said, I will show you the next step. There is still much to learn. You followed her, feeling the weight of your new role settling onto your shoulders. The path ahead was uncertain, but you knew one thing for sure, you were no longer just a visitor in this place. You were its protector, its guardian. And with that, the forest had become part of you. The journey had only just begun. The journey had begun, but the road ahead was not one that could be traversed with ease. The forest had accepted you as its protector, but it had not forgotten the ancient laws that governed its existence. To truly claim your place among the trees, you would have to face the trials of the grove. These were not challenges meant to break you, but to test your strength, your resolve, and your understanding of the delicate balance that sustained the land. Myra led you through the winding paths of the grove, her footsteps silent on the soft earth. The trees were dense here, their branches interwoven like a tapestry, creating a canopy that shaded the path from the sun. The air was thick with the scent of damp moss and the earthy fragrance of cacao. Your first trial, Myra said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency, is one of patience. You looked at her, confused. Patience. What did that have to do with protecting the forest? Myra smiled faintly, as though reading your thoughts. The grove is alive. It grows, it breathes, it changes. But it does so at its own pace. You must learn to move with it, to understand that the forest does not bend to your will. You must wait for it to show you the way. She paused in front of a large, ancient tree. Its trunk was thick, its bark rough and weathered by time. But it was not just its size that commanded attention. The tree seemed to pulse with a strange energy, its roots spread wide, stretching deep into the earth. This tree, Myra said, holds the memory of the forest. It is one of the oldest in the grove. It will not reveal its secrets to just anyone. You must ask it for guidance, but you must be patient. It will take time. You stepped forward, your hand resting lightly on the rough bark. The moment your skin made contact, a wave of warmth spread through you, like the tree was alive beneath your touch. But the warmth was not just physical. It was a deep, resonant energy that seemed to connect you to the land itself. You closed your eyes, feeling the pulse of the tree. It was slow, steady, like the heartbeat of the earth. You stood there, letting the tree's energy flow through you, waiting. The minutes stretched on, the air growing still as the forest held its breath. At first, nothing happened. But then, slowly, you began to feel it. A whisper, faint at first, like a breeze brushing past your ear. The voice of the tree. Not in words, but in feelings, in visions. You saw the forest as it had been before, long before humans had come. The trees were taller, their trunks thick and strong, their branches heavy with fruit. You saw the rain falling, the soil rich and dark, teeming with life. The vision shifted, and you saw the grove as it had been in the past, but this time, you saw the keeper, her eyes glowing like gold, her hands raised in reverence to the sky. The vision faded, and you were left standing before the tree, your hands still pressed against its bark. The warmth was gone, but the energy remained, lingering in your chest. Myra was watching you closely, her eyes full of understanding. "The forest has spoken," she said. "You have shown patience, and it has granted you a vision of the past. But there is still more to learn. Your next trial will test your resolve." You nodded, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. The vision had shown you something important, something that would guide you in the trials to come. But you knew that this was only the beginning. The forest had many more lessons to teach. Myra turned and began walking deeper into the grove. "Follow me," she said, "and prepare yourself for what is to come." The deeper you walked into the grove, the quieter the world seemed to become. The wind that had swept through the trees earlier had died down, leaving behind a stillness that was almost unnatural. The path twisted between ancient trees whose bark had been weathered by centuries of rain and sun, but their roots remained strong, dug deep into the soil. The air was thick with the scent of the earth, damp and rich, and yet something felt wrong. Myra led you without speaking, her pace steady but her eyes scanning the shadows beneath the trees. The grove, though lush and alive, felt different now. The usual hum of life, the song of the birds, the rustling of the leaves had faded, replaced by an eerie silence. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. "Something is not right," Myra finally said, her voice low and tense. "The balance has been disturbed." Your heart quickened. The forest had always felt like a place of sanctuary, alive, vibrant, and full of energy. But now, you could feel the weight of something darker in the air. The path ahead became narrower, the trees closing in around you, their branches heavy with fruit that hadn't ripened. The cacao pods, once vibrant and full of promise, were now wilted, their skins pale and dull. You could sense it, something had invaded the grove. Something that threatened the very essence of the forest. Myra stopped at the edge of a clearing, her eyes scanning the space before her. She motioned for you to step forward. "This is where the shadow lies," she whispered, as though afraid to disturb the stillness. The clearing was bathed in the soft light of the setting sun, but it was unnaturally cold here, a chill that seemed to seep into your bones. In the center of the clearing stood a single tree, tall, dark, and twisted. Its branches reached up like gnarled fingers, its bark blackened and scorched as though it had been burned by something other than fire. The cacao pods on this tree were shriveled, their surfaces cracked and dry. "This is the source of the disturbance," Myra said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "This tree was once part of the grove, part of the balance. But something has taken hold of it. A darkness. A corruption." You stepped forward, drawn to the tree. As you neared it, the air around you grew colder, and the ground beneath your feet seemed to pulse with a strange energy. You reached out a hand, your fingers brushing the blackened bark, and immediately, you felt it. A sharp, cold jolt ran through your body, like a lightning strike, sending a wave of panic through your chest. The tree trembled under your touch, and a deep, guttural whisper filled your mind. It wasn't words, just a feeling, a presence, something ancient and malevolent. "The forest is sick," Myra said, her voice breaking. "It has been infected by a force we cannot control. The balance has been shattered." The darkness in the tree seemed to respond to her words, its branches twisting in a violent jerk, as if it were alive, angry, twisted, hungry. The sky above darkened, and the air grew thick with an unnatural weight. You could feel it now, the pull of the darkness, the corruption spreading through the land. It wasn't just the tree. It was the forest itself. The energy that had once flowed through the grove, vibrant and alive, had turned stagnant, twisted by something far more powerful than anything you had encountered before. Myra stepped back, her eyes wide with fear. "We must stop it, before it spreads further." You knew what had to be done. The Keeper had chosen you, had entrusted you with the responsibility of protecting the grove. But now, you faced something far darker than anything you had imagined. The shadow had come for the forest, and it was up to you to stop it. You turned to Myra. "How?" She stepped forward, her gaze steady despite the fear that gripped her. "We need to cleanse the tree. But it will not be easy. The corruption is deep, and it is feeding on the life of the forest." Myra reached into the pouch at her side and withdrew a small vial filled with a glowing liquid. "This is a potion made from the sacred herbs of the grove. It is the only thing that can purify the darkness." She handed it to you, her hands trembling. "Pour it at the base of the tree. Let the essence of the forest flow into it. But be careful. The shadow will try to resist." You nodded, your heart pounding in your chest. You had been prepared for the trials of the grove, but this was different. This was a fight for the life of the forest itself. You approached the tree, the vial of glowing liquid clutched tightly in your hand. The air around you seemed to crackle with tension, the ground beneath your feet shaking as if the earth itself were reacting to the darkness. With a steady hand, you poured the liquid at the base of the tree. The moment it touched the soil, the air changed. A low rumble echoed through the clearing, and the tree's twisted branches seemed to recoil, as if in pain. The darkness began to writhe, a thick, black smoke rising from the bark, curling into the sky. You could feel the weight of the corruption pushing against the light, trying to choke the life out of the grove. But the potion was working. The glow of the liquid spread, illuminating the clearing with a soft, golden light. The smoke began to dissipate, slowly, like mist lifting in the morning sun. The tree groaned, its bark cracking, splitting as the light began to purify the darkness that had taken root inside it. The air hummed with the energy of the forest, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the grove began to breathe again. The blackened bark began to heal, the twisted branches straightening, the cacao pod slowly returning to life, ripening with vibrant color. The forest was waking, responding to the healing energy that flowed through it. Myra watched in awe, her breath steadying as the clearing filled with light. "You've done it," she whispered. "You've cleansed the shadow." The grove was alive once more. But as the last remnants of the darkness disappeared, a shadow fell across your heart. The trial was over, but the war was far from won. The shadow had been defeated for now, but it would return. And when it did, it would be even stronger. You looked at Myra, your heart filled with both hope and fear. The keeper had chosen you, but the path ahead would not be easy. The grove was yours to protect, but the darkness would always be waiting. The clearing was still now, the air thick with the sweet, earthy scent of fresh cacao and rain-drenched soil. The twisted, blackened tree stood no longer as a symbol of corruption, but as a beacon of renewal, its bark a rich, healthy brown, its branches strong once again, laden with ripe pods that gleamed in the soft light filtering through the canopy. The forest had healed, but the weight of the battle still hung heavy in the air. Myra stood beside you, her expression somber, her eyes scanning the now peaceful grove. The quiet after the storm felt almost unnatural, as though the world was holding its breath. "You've done it," she said, her voice filled with a quiet pride. "The forest is restored for now. But the shadow will return. It always does." You nodded, the realization settling deep in your bones. The forest had been given a temporary reprieve, but this wasn't over. The darkness had been pushed back, but it was waiting. Watching. And you had been chosen to protect the grove, to stand between it and the forces that sought to corrupt it. "The shadow feeds on imbalance," Myra continued, her voice low. "It feeds on the greed, the destruction of the natural world. And the more we push it back, the stronger it becomes. The grove is a part of something much larger, a web of life that stretches beyond the trees, beyond this grove. And there are those who would seek to tear it apart." You felt the weight of her words. This wasn't just about protecting a few trees. This was about protecting the very essence of life, the balance between nature and the world beyond. The trees, the rain, the earth, all of it was interconnected. And you were the keeper of that connection. But even as the weight of responsibility pressed down on you, you knew something more. The keeper had chosen you for a reason. You had felt the pulse of the forest, the connection to something ancient and powerful. and you would not let that power fall into darkness. Myra looked at you, her gaze steady. "The grove will call to you," she said. "When the time comes, you will know. You will know when it is time to fight again." The wind shifted suddenly, a gust that rustled the leaves and sent ripples through the canopy. The storm was far from over. It was only beginning. The air grew thick again, as though the forest was bracing for something. The sky, which had been clearing, was once again darkening, the clouds gathering ominously overhead. You could feel the pull of something on the horizon, something that was watching and waiting. "Look," Myra said, her voice rising above the wind. She pointed toward the horizon, where the trees parted, revealing a vast expanse of land beyond the grove. The sky above was turning black, the clouds swirling in a chaotic pattern. And in the distance, a figure stood tall, cloaked in shadow, its silhouette barely visible against the storm. The figure didn't move. It simply stood there, waiting. Watching. Myra's voice was low, filled with a quiet dread. "The storm is gathering. And it is bringing something with it. We must prepare." You felt it then, the weight of the coming storm. The darkness was gathering once more, and the battle was far from over. This time, it would be different. This time, the shadow would not be defeated so easily. With a final glance at the shadowed figure in the distance, you turned to Myra. "What do we do now?" She looked back at you, her expression resolute. "We gather those who will stand with us. The forest will need more than just one protector. It will need an army." You nodded, understanding. This was no longer just about defending the grove. This was about something larger, something that would require all your strength, all your resolve. Together, you turned and began walking toward the heart of the grove once more. The battle was just beginning. And this time, you would not face it alone. The winds grew stronger as you and Myra made your way deeper into the grove. The once serene and harmonious forest now pulsed with an unease, as if it, too, sensed the approaching storm. The air, once rich with the scent of cacao and rain, now felt heavy with anticipation. The trees loomed taller, their twisted branches creaking under the weight of something darker that threatened to overtake them. Myra walked beside you, her eyes scanning the grove, her steps swift and deliberate. She was no longer just a guide or a mentor, she was a warrior of the forest, ready for the trials that lay ahead. But even she knew that this time, the darkness was different. Stronger. More dangerous. "We cannot face this alone," Myra said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. "The forest is vast, and there are others who share our bond with the land. We must call on them." You looked at her, confusion clouding your thoughts. "Others? Who are they?" Myra's gaze softened. "There are those who live in the shadows of the trees. The guardians of the deeper groves, the ancient ones who protect the heart of the forest. The spirits of the land who have been here long before any of us. They are the ones who can help us. You had heard rumors of such beings, stories whispered by the elders of the village, the spirits that resided in the deepest, most sacred parts of the forest, guardians who only revealed themselves when the balance was threatened. But you had never truly believed in them, not until now. Myra led you deeper into the grove, her path unwavering as she moved with purpose. The air seemed to thicken as you approached a hidden part of the forest, one that felt ancient, untouched by human hands. The trees here were older, their trunks massive, gnarled, and covered with centuries of moss. The canopy above was dense, the light dimming as the shadows of the storm began to creep closer. "This is where the spirits reside," Myra said quietly, stopping at the base of a towering tree. Its bark was silver gray, smooth, and reflective, and its roots stretched wide across the ground like the veins of the earth itself. The elder trees. They are the oldest beings in the grove, older than any of the other trees. They are the guardians of the forest's soul. You approached the tree, your heart pounding as you reached out to touch its bark. The moment your fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through you, as though the tree had come alive beneath your touch. You could feel it, the ancient power that thrummed in its veins, a pulse that resonated with the very heartbeat of the earth. Myra stepped forward, her voice reverent. "Speak your intention, and the elder tree will listen. The grove calls for help, and we must ask for their strength." You closed your eyes, taking a deep breath, and placed both hands on the tree's bark. The moment you did, a voice whispered in your mind, not words, but feelings, emotions that flowed through you like a river of light and sound. It was as if the tree was speaking to you, its ancient consciousness reaching out across the veil between worlds. The vision came quickly. You saw the forest, lush and vibrant, teeming with life. You saw the rain pouring down, the cacao trees thriving, their branches heavy with fruit. But then, the vision darkened. The trees began to wither, their leaves curling and turning black. The sky grew stormy, the rain turning to dust. A shadow stretched across the grove, a darkness that seemed to devour everything in its path. The forest was dying. But then, through the vision, you saw something else, a figure, cloaked in light, standing at the center of the grove. The figure raised its hand, and the darkness retreated, retreating into the shadows from which it had come. You blinked, and the vision faded, leaving you standing before the elder tree, your hands still pressed against its bark. Myra watched you closely, her eyes full of understanding. "The forest has shown you the way," she said softly. "The elder tree has answered your call." The air around you shifted, and from the depths of the grove, you heard it, a deep, rumbling voice, ancient and full of wisdom. "Who calls upon the heart of the grove?" The voice was both a question and a command, its tone both warm and unyielding. Myra stepped back, bowing her head in respect. "It is I, Myra Veland, keeper of the grove. And this is the one chosen by the forest to protect it? The shadow has returned, and we seek your aid." The trees around you groaned, as though awakening from a long slumber. The wind shifted, rustling the leaves, and for a moment, everything fell silent. Then, from the heart of the elder tree, a branch stirred. It twisted and coiled, its bark shimmering as it reached out toward you. It touched your shoulder gently, and a warmth spread through you, filling you with strength and clarity. "You are the protector," the voice said again, this time softer, almost soothing. "But you are not alone. The forest is vast, and its roots run deep. You will need the strength of the old ones, the guardians of the earth, to face the darkness that threatens it." You felt the weight of the responsibility settle on your shoulders. The path ahead would not be easy, but you were ready. The forest had chosen you, and now, you would protect it not just from the shadow, but from whatever force sought to destroy the delicate balance of life that sustained it. "The storm is coming," Myra said, stepping forward again. "But now, we have the strength to face it." The wind picked up once more, swirling through the trees, and the sound of distant thunder echoed in the distance. The storm was nearing, but you no longer felt afraid. You had the strength of the forest behind you. The winds were rising now, sweeping through the trees with an urgency that matched the pulse in your chest. The distant thunder rumbled like the growl of some ancient creature stirring in the depths of the earth. The forest felt alive, but not in the peaceful, nurturing way it once had. Now, it was alert, tense, ready for the storm that was coming. Myra stood at your side, her face set in determination, her eyes scanning the horizon as the first raindrops began to fall. The sacred clearing, once full of vibrant life, now seemed shrouded in anticipation, as though even the air itself knew that the time for waiting was over. "It's here," Myra said, her voice steady but edged with a sense of urgency. "The storm has returned, and with it, the shadow." You could feel it now, the shift in the energy around you. The shadows were stretching, creeping through the grove, as if they had taken form and were moving closer. The once clear sky had darkened, the clouds thick and swirling in unnatural patterns. The rain came in torrents, the forest's song drowned by the howling wind. But you had been chosen. The grove had given you its strength, its power. And now, it was time to use it. "The Keeper has granted you the power to protect this land," Myra continued, her voice unwavering. "But the battle is not just one of strength. It is one of unity." You turned to her, understanding her meaning. The forest was vast, its roots deep, its life force spread far and wide. You could not face the shadow alone. "Gather the guardians," you said. "We must call on those who protect the deeper groves. We will need their strength." Myra nodded, her expression grim. "I will call to them. But you must stand firm. The shadow will try to break you. It will twist your mind, cloud your judgment. But you are the protector now. You must be the beacon." You looked out across the grove, the trees shaking under the force of the wind, the dark figure in the distance growing clearer as it drew closer. The shadow was taking shape, a mass of darkness, swirling and alive, its tendrils reaching out like a living thing. "Let them come," you said, your voice steady despite the fear that gripped your heart. "I will not let the grove fall." With those words, you felt it, an overwhelming surge of energy, like the very earth was rising up beneath you, rooting you to the land. The connection between you and the forest, the spirit of the cacao, and the keeper had grown deeper than you could have imagined. You were no longer just an observer of the forest. You were a part of it, and it was a part of you. Myra stepped forward, raising her arms toward the sky. "Spirits of the grove, guardians of the earth, the time has come for you to rise. The shadow threatens our land, and it is time to stand united, to protect what has been entrusted to us. Answer the call." At her command, the trees seemed to shift, their trunks creaking as though they were stretching, awakening. The air around you grew thick with energy, the wind howling louder, carrying the call of the guardians through the forest. Slowly, figures began to emerge from the shadows of the trees, tall, ethereal figures cloaked in light and shadow. The guardians of the forest, the ancient protectors who had slumbered in the deep groves, were answering the call. Each guardian was different. Some were cloaked in vines, their skin like bark, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Others appeared as wisps of mist, their forms shifting in and out of view, their presence felt more than seen. But all of them carried an aura of power, of ancient wisdom, of a connection to the earth that was far beyond anything you had ever known. Myra turned to you, her eyes full of determination. "They are here," she said. "The guardians will fight alongside us. But you must lead them. You are the protector now." The shadow loomed closer, a massive, swirling mass of darkness that seemed to swallow the light around it. You could feel its presence, its malice, its desire to consume everything in its path. It was time. The guardians moved to form a protective circle around you and Myra. Together, you stood at the center, the energy of the grove pulsing through you. The wind howled louder, the storm intensified, but you could feel the strength of the guardians at your back. The time for waiting was over. The battle had begun. And you were ready. The shadow surged forward, its tendrils reaching out like claws, seeking to tear through the forest, to crush everything in its path. But you stood firm, your hand raised toward the sky, the power of the forest coursing through you. "The grove will not fall," you shouted, your voice rising above the storm. "We will fight. We will protect this land." With a final cry, you summoned the power of the grove, the spirit of the cacao, the strength of the guardians. The ground beneath you shook, the air crackling with energy as the forest itself rose to meet the shadow. The battle had begun. The battle had begun, and the storm intensified with every heartbeat. The winds howled, whipping through the trees, as the shadow moved closer, a mass of darkness that threatened to consume everything in its path. The guardians stood tall around you, their ethereal forms flickering with light and energy, their eyes glowing with determination. The air crackled with raw power as the grove itself seemed to rise to meet the oncoming darkness. You stood at the center of the guardians, the strength of the grove coursing through you. Your hands were raised, your connection to the forest deepening with every breath. You could feel the power of the cacao, the ancient bond between you and the earth, the very essence of life itself. The shadow advanced, its tendrils reaching out like claws, seeking to tear through the grove and extinguish everything it touched. The trees groaned under its weight, their roots struggling to hold their ground as the darkness tried to pull them down. But you would not let it happen. The guardians around you raised their arms, chanting in a language older than the forest itself. Their voices echoed through the grove, a call to the ancient spirits that had once walked this land. The power of the earth surged beneath your feet, and you felt the energy of the forest course through you like a river of light. The shadow recoiled for a moment, as though sensing the strength that was rising against it. But it was relentless. With a deafening roar, the darkness surged forward, crashing toward you and the guardians like a tidal wave. The trees bent beneath its weight, their branches creaking and snapping as the shadow swept through the grove. You stood firm, your heart pounding in your chest, your mind focused. You knew what had to be done. The grove had entrusted you with its protection, and you would not fail. With a mighty cry, you reached deep into the heart of the forest, drawing on the power of the cacao, the strength of the ancient trees, and the energy of the guardians. The earth trembled beneath you, and the air around you crackled with power. The shadow recoiled once again, but this time, it could not retreat. The ground beneath your feet began to glow with a golden light, spreading outward like a wave. The trees responded, their trunks glowing with the same light, their roots twisting and writhing as they reached deep into the earth. The sky above began to clear, the clouds parting as a brilliant light broke through, bathing the grove in a warm, radiant glow. The shadow howled in rage, its tendrils flailing wildly as the light of the grove pushed it back. But it was not enough. The darkness was too powerful, too insidious. It was not just a force of nature, it was a force of destruction, of chaos, and it would not be easily banished. Myra stepped forward, her eyes filled with determination. "We must combine our strength," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging around you. "Together, we can defeat it." The guardians nodded, their forms flickering with light as they chanted in unison. The air grew thick with power as the guardians pooled their energy, their voices rising in harmony. The earth beneath your feet trembled, and the light around you grew brighter, more intense. With a final cry, you reached out, your hands glowing with the power of the grove. The light surged forward, a brilliant wave that collided with the shadow. The darkness writhed and howled, its tendrils curling and snapping, but the light continued to push forward, relentless and pure. And then, with a final burst of energy, the shadow shattered. The air around you crackled as the darkness dissipated, leaving only the pure, radiant light of the grove. The storm began to fade, the winds dying down as the clouds parted to reveal a clear sky. The grove stood tall, its trees swaying gently in the breeze, their branches heavy with fruit once more. The cacao pods gleamed in the soft light, their colors vibrant and full of promise. The air was still, peaceful, as if the very forest itself had taken a deep breath. You stood at the center of it all, your heart racing, your body trembling with the energy that had surged through you. The guardians around you stood silent, their forms glowing softly in the afterlight of the battle. Myra approached you, her eyes filled with quiet pride. "You did it," she said, her voice gentle but filled with reverence. "You protected the grove. You defeated the shadow." But as you looked around, you knew this was not the end. The battle was over for now, but the shadow would return. It always did. The balance of the forest was fragile, and it would require constant vigilance, constant protection. But for now, the grove was safe. For now, the cacao trees stood strong, their branches heavy with fruit, their roots deep in the earth. The spirit of the grove had been tested and it had been upheld. And with that, you knew your path was clear. The keeper had chosen you. You were the protector of the grove, the guardian of the cacao, the one who would stand against the shadow whenever it threatened to return. The storm had passed. The battle had been won. But the journey was far from over. The storm had passed, but the grove was not yet at peace. Though the dark shadow had been defeated, the echo of its presence still lingered in the air, like a heavy fog that refused to dissipate. The trees, once vibrant with life, stood as silent witnesses to the battle that had just been fought. Their branches, though still heavy with cacao, swayed gently in the breeze, as if they too were recovering from the strain of the storm. You stood at the center of the grove, your heart still racing from the battle. The guardians, though now silent, surrounded you, their ethereal forms flickering in the soft light of the forest. The energy from the battle still crackled in the air, but it was now subdued, like the aftershock of a great force. Myra stood beside you, her eyes fixed on the horizon, where the last remnants of the storm clouded the sky. She had been with you every step of the way, guiding you through the trials and the battles. She had witnessed the growth of the forest, the strength of the cacao, and the power of the keeper. And now, she watched as you took your place as the protector of the grove. "The battle is won," Myra said, her voice steady but tinged with a quiet sadness. "But the war is far from over." You turned to her, confusion clouding your mind. "What do you mean?" Myra's gaze never wavered from the horizon. "The shadow has been defeated for now, but it will return. It always does. It is not a force that can be easily vanquished. It is part of the balance of the world. Just as light and dark coexist, so too do creation and destruction. The shadow is the natural consequence of life, of growth. It is inevitable." The weight of her words settled on you like a stone in your chest. The realization began to sink in. You had defeated the shadow in this moment, but its presence was still out there, lurking, waiting for its chance to strike again. And when it did, it would not be the same. It would be stronger, more powerful, and more dangerous than ever before. "We cannot let our guard down," Myra continued. The forest needs constant protection. The cacao needs constant nurturing. The keeper's blessing is not a gift that can be taken for granted. It is a responsibility, one that requires vigilance, strength, and sacrifice. You nodded, understanding now the weight of your role. This was not just about defending the grove from a single threat. This was about standing watch over the forest, guarding it against the darkness that would always seek to consume it. And you, as the chosen protector, had to be its eternal guardian. The balance of the forest is delicate, Myra said, her voice soft but full of urgency. If the grove is to survive, if the cacao is to thrive, we must be prepared for what is to come. You looked at her, your resolve hardening. What must we do? Myra met your gaze, her eyes filled with both pride and sorrow. We must call on the ancient ones. The guardians of the deeper groves, those who have stood watch over the land for centuries. They are the ones who can help us defend the forest, to keep the shadow at bay. You felt the pull of her words, a deep instinct telling you that she was right. The guardians were not just protectors of the grove, they were part of something greater, something ancient that connected all of nature. Their strength was a force that could not be underestimated. But finding them would not be easy. The deeper groves were not places easily reached, and the guardians were not beings that could be summoned at will. They were elusive, enigmatic, and bound by ancient codes. Myra turned to you, her expression filled with both determination and sadness. We must go to the heart of the forest, to the place where the roots of the world meet. It is there that the guardians will be found. But be warned, this journey is not without its dangers. The deeper groves are filled with tests, trials that will challenge your very soul. You nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. This was no longer just about protecting the cacao or defeating the shadow. This was about seeking out the ancient power of the guardians, to forge a new alliance that would strengthen the forest's defenses against the dark forces that would always seek to corrupt it. With a final glance at the grove, you turned to follow Myra as she led the way. The path ahead was unclear, shrouded in mystery and uncertainty. The deeper groves were a place of legend, a place few had ever ventured, and fewer still had returned from. But you knew that this was the only way forward. The forest needed the guardians, and you were the one chosen to find them. As you walked through the silent, shadowed paths of the grove, the trees seemed to whisper, their leaves rustling with secrets that only they knew. The air felt thick, alive with an ancient energy that pulsed beneath the earth, a force that connected all life in the grove, all of nature. And as you moved deeper into the forest, you could feel it, the presence of something ancient, something powerful, watching over you. The deeper groves were waiting. The deeper groves were unlike any part of the forest you had ever seen. As you and Myra moved further into the dense thicket, the air grew heavier with an ancient power. The trees here were taller, their trunks wider and more twisted, their bark a deep shade of midnight black, interspersed with veins of silvery sap that glowed faintly in the dim light. The ground beneath your feet was softer, almost spongy, and the roots of the trees seemed to twist and coil like serpents, reaching toward you with an otherworldly sense of purpose. The path was narrow, and as you ventured deeper, the space around you seemed to close in, the air thick with the weight of centuries of secrets. The deeper groves were a place of ancient power, a place where the very essence of the forest pulsed through the earth. The trees here were not simply trees, they were the keepers of the earth's memory, the holders of all that had ever passed through the forest. You could feel it, the pressure of the past, the weight of the trials that awaited you. The air hummed with magic, with energy, but it was not a gentle magic. This was a magic that tested the very limits of those who dared to seek it, a magic that would not be easily mastered. Myra walked beside you, her gaze steady, her movements purposeful. She had been here before, but even she seemed to feel the intensity of the place. Her steps were sure, but there was an edge of caution to her demeanor, as if she knew that once you entered this part of the forest, there was no turning back. The deeper groves are where the true trials lie, Myra said, her voice low and filled with respect. The guardians of the forest do not reveal themselves easily. They are bound by ancient laws, and only those who prove their worth may call on their power. You nodded, your mind racing. This was the final step in your journey, the trial that would decide if you were truly worthy to protect the grove. You had already faced the shadow, the darkness that had threatened to consume the forest, but now, you were entering a realm that was even more dangerous. The deeper groves were a place of testing, a place where only the strongest would survive. The path ahead began to twist and turn, the trees growing even closer, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out most of the light. The air grew thicker, and the soft rustling of leaves was replaced by a deep, almost melodic hum, as though the very heart of the forest was singing. And then, you saw it. The heart of the forest, the place where the roots of the world met. A massive tree stood before you, its trunk so wide that you could not see its end. The tree's bark was smooth and dark, almost metallic, with veins of gold running through it like rivers of light. Its roots spread out across the ground, intertwining with those of other trees, creating a vast network that seemed to connect everything in the forest. This was the sacred tree, the heart of the grove. It was said to be the oldest and most powerful tree in the forest, its roots stretching deep into the earth, connecting the very soul of the land to the skies above. It was from this tree that the forest drew its strength, its life force. It was the guardian of all that lived within the grove, and now, it was your turn to prove yourself worthy of its power. Myra stopped before the tree, her eyes filled with reverence. The guardians will not reveal themselves until you have passed the trials, she said, her voice soft but filled with urgency. You must prove your strength, your resolve, and your ability to listen to the forest. Only then will they show themselves. You took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment settle upon your shoulders. This was it. This was the trial that would determine your future as the protector of the grove. You reached out and placed your hand against the massive trunk of the tree. The moment your skin made contact with its surface, a surge of energy shot through you, unlike anything you had ever felt before. The ground beneath your feet began to tremble, and the air grew heavy with magic. The tree groaned, its ancient bark shifting and creaking as though it were awakening from a long slumber. A voice low and rumbling echoed through your mind, a voice that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. Who seeks the heart of the grove? The voice boomed. It was a sound unlike any you had heard, ancient and filled with power. It was not a voice of anger, but one of judgment and invitation to prove yourself. I am the chosen protector of the grove, you said, your voice steady, though your heart raced. I seek the strength of the guardians, the power to protect this land from the shadow that threatens it. The ground trembled again, and the tree seemed to pulse, as though it were considering your words. A silence fell over the grove, broken only by the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves. Then, the voice returned, this time softer, but no less powerful. Prove your worth, it said. Only those who understand the balance of the forest, those who can listen to its needs, will be granted the strength of the guardians. The air around you seemed to vibrate with energy as the tree's branches began to shift, opening up to reveal a hidden path that led deeper into the grove. The ground beneath your feet glowed with an ethereal light, and the trees around you seemed to bow, as if parting to allow you to pass. You knew what you had to do. You stepped forward, following the glowing path, your senses heightened as you moved deeper into the heart of the forest. The air was thick with magic, and you could feel the weight of the trials ahead. As you walked, you began to see flashes of the past visions of the forest's history. You saw the first guardians of the grove, ancient beings who had walked this land long before you. You saw them fighting the darkness, protecting the trees, nurturing the land. And you saw the shadow, an ever-present force that had threatened the forest time and time again. But each time, the guardians had fought back, protecting the balance, ensuring that life would continue to thrive in the grove. The path before you seemed to stretch on forever, but you pressed forward, determined to face the trials. The forest was counting on you, the cacao trees were counting on you, and the keeper was watching. This was your moment to prove yourself. The deeper you walked, the more you could feel the forest's heartbeat, the rhythm of life, of balance, of growth. It was in the air, in the soil, in the very trees themselves. The forest was alive, and it was calling you to become a part of it. And then, as you reached the deepest point of the grove, you stopped. Before you stood the final trial, the guardian of the heart of the grove. A massive figure, cloaked in light and shadow, stood in your path. Its form was both human and tree, its body woven with vines and leaves, its eyes glowing with an ancient, otherworldly light. It was the first guardian, the protector of the grove's heart. The air was thick with energy, the very ground beneath you trembling as the guardian of the heart of the grove stood before you, its form shifting like a living tree, roots intertwined with the earth, branches stretching toward the sky. Its eyes glowed with a piercing light, ancient and wise, and its presence filled the space with an overwhelming sense of power. It was the culmination of your journey, the final test that would determine if you were truly worthy of the power of the guardians, the protector of the grove. The balance of the forest, the life of the cacao, and the very essence of the land rested in this moment. The guardian's voice echoed through the grove, deep and resonant, like the sound of roots breaking through stone. You have come far, chosen one, it said. But the trials are not yet complete. To claim the strength of the guardians, to protect this land, you must prove your worth. This is the final test, one that will determine if you truly understand the balance of life and death, creation and destruction. You felt the weight of its words, the weight of the forest itself pressing down on you. This was not just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the soul of the forest, for the strength to protect it from the darkness that would one day return. It was a test of your heart, your resolve, and your understanding of the forces at play. The guardian stepped forward, its massive form looming over you. The first trial was one of patience. The second trial, of strength. But this final trial is one of sacrifice. You could feel the energy in the air shift, the ground beneath you becoming unstable, as if the entire forest were holding its breath. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the sense of something ancient, something primordial. To protect the grove, the guardian continued, you must be willing to sacrifice something precious. The balance of life requires that something be given up in order to preserve what is sacred. The forest has shown you its power, and now it asks you to show your commitment. Will you give up what you hold most dear for the sake of the land? Will you sacrifice what you love to protect the grove? The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The sacrifice was not a simple one. It was not the loss of a single tree or a fleeting moment. It was something deeper, something that would require you to give up a piece of yourself. You looked around the grove, seeing the trees that had become your home, the cacao that you had nurtured and protected. You thought of the shadow that had tried to tear it all down, and the power you had drawn from the forest to fight it. You thought of Myra, who had guided you every step of the way, her wisdom and strength helping you through the darkest moments. And then it hit you, the true nature of the sacrifice. It was not just about giving up something physical. It was about giving up control, about surrendering yourself to the forest, to the land. It was about trusting that the forest's power would always return, no matter how dark the storm or how strong the shadow. The guardian watched you, its eyes filled with the weight of ages, as though it knew you were struggling with the decision. The forest was alive, and it was watching, waiting for your choice. I will do it, you said, your voice steady but filled with resolve. I will give up what I must to protect the grove. The forest is my heart. It has given me strength, and now, I will offer it back. The moment you spoke those words, the ground trembled, and a brilliant light exploded from the center of the grove. The air around you swirled with energy, and the guardian stepped back, allowing the light to fill the space. You could feel the power of the grove, the life of the cacao, the pulse of the trees, the very essence of the land flowing through you. In that moment, you understood. The forest was not a place to be protected out of duty alone. It was a part of you. A part of everything. The trees, the wind, the rain, they were all connected, all intertwined in an eternal dance of life and death. The guardian's test had not been about losing something, it had been about understanding that the sacrifice was not a loss, but a transformation. The light began to fade, and the grove around you was still once more. The trees stood tall, their branches heavy with fruit, their roots deep in the earth. The cacao trees were full and lush, their pods ripening in the sunlight. The storm had passed, and the shadow had been driven back, but now, the forest was stronger than ever. The guardian stepped forward, its massive form towering over you, but this time, it was not a threat. It was a presence, a symbol of the power of the land, the keeper of the balance. "You have passed the final trial," the guardian said, its voice warm with approval. "You are the protector of the grove, the guardian of the cacao. The forest is yours to protect, and its power is now yours to command. But remember, the balance is fragile. The shadow will always return. But you, chosen one, will be ready. You will always be ready." With those words, the guardian's form began to fade, its presence dissolving into the wind, its power returning to the earth. The forest around you hummed with life, and you felt the weight of your responsibility settle upon your shoulders. You were the protector now. You were the keeper of the grove. Myra stepped forward, her eyes filled with pride and understanding. "You have done it," she said. "You are the keeper now. The forest is yours to guard. The shadow may return, but you are ready. You are the heart of the grove, and the balance will remain." You stood tall, the wind whispering through the trees, and for the first time, you felt a deep, unshakable peace. The forest was alive, and you were its guardian. The trials were over, but the journey had just begun.